Hello, void and all who inhabit it. It's me, a brooding, hot 25-year-old teenager. Ten points if you get the reference. I was researching for a now abandoned script on Not Safe for Work ASMR, and I came across a Reddit post. I know we're already off to a wild start, but stay with me here. That was complaining about age play content being restricted in a erotic audio subreddit. In the top response to that comment, a user asked, "Isn't it healthy for us to move away from this stuff?" They're asking specifically in response to taboo kinks, but I want to apply this question to mainstream media that also blurs the lines of inappropriate sexual behavior with characters who are minors. Also, I've recently been seeing a lot of conversations on Twitter with people asking why so many dramas are set in high school, especially when the school portion doesn't even matter for a bulk of the storyline. And there's a myriad of reasons. Society's tendency to attach women's beauty with youth, leading to an insistent push to make desirable female characters as young as possible. Specific plot choices that are dependent on characters being in high school, but not really, because you could just tweak it a little bit to make it applicable to adults in community college. Wanting characters to have a valid reason to carry backpacks. The list is endless, truly. But the main reason I want to look at, which kind of ties back to connecting women's beauty with youth, is that a lot of messaging we get is very comfortable with and encourages sexualizing girls. Beyond beauty, it's about power. If you partner with someone at a different life stage than you, there's very likely a power imbalance. There's little that a 16-year-old and a 22-year-old have in common in terms of life experience, in terms of brain development, in terms of responsibilities. But being shown several images in which that kind of pairing is justified can help people rationalize unhealthy dynamics in real life. I'm going to spend the bulk of this video cast unpacking a few specific examples from television, but I do want to note that while I'm focusing on teen girls, we can also see unhealthy dynamics with teen boys being romanticized in media. Shout out to Call Me By Your Name. A lot of people get upset when you critique that movie for the age gap, but the truth is, age gaps in the LGBT community are hella common, and they're still fucking gross. And calling that out is not a manifestation of internalized homophobia. One of the biggest issues with age gap relationships is the desire for connection that leaves so many people in their late teens and early 20s vulnerable to manipulation. That is amplified if you are queer and longing is your default setting. If you feel this desperate need to be known and seen by someone, and here comes a full-grown adult sweeping in to say, "I can be that person," that shit is tantalizing. Hell, at my big age now, it's tantalizing. But for someone so much older than you, for an adult to say that to you as a child is dangerous. The other quick thing about media showing teen boys in relationships with adults is that they're much more rare. We often instead see age gaps between two consenting adults that's treated a bit more realistically, with other characters reacting with hesitation and or applauding the sexual prowess of the younger man. The best example to the contrary is Archie and Miss Grundy from Riverdale, whose relationship seems like it's treated much like the ones we're used to seeing with teen girls. But, this is a CW show, so morality. And also, Miss Lady gets murdered, which is important because grown men who pursue teen girls in television shows don't always go away so finitely. Which brings me to the murder mystery of the hour, Pretty Little Liars. If you have the great esteem of having never seen Pretty Little Liars, it's a murder mystery teen drama set in some random Pennsylvania suburb. The state does matter here, but I'll get to that. One of the main characters, Aria, is 15 when we first see her in the pilot episode, where she goes to a bar and makes out with this random dude. Later, on the first day of school, she learns that the random dude from the bar is actually her English teacher, who is allegedly 22, but I don't buy that. Anyway, despite several layers of fucked upness, they date on and off for the entire series and end the series getting married. In the books that this show is based off of, Their relationship is exposed early on, and Ezra goes to jail. That's it. I remember an interview with the author around the beginning of the show where even she was like, I don't know why they ditched a girl. They should have sent his ass to prison. Instead, he's kept around for the entirety of the show, and any attempts for there to be consequences for his behavior are paltry. Despite the show thankfully having ended a few years ago, I'm using Arya and Ezra as the major case study for the detriment of this kind of media because of all of the mental gymnastics, both in the show and by fans, that were played out to prevent him from being punished or removed. A bunch of people became criminal law graduates of Google University and argued for the validity of the relationship based off of Pennsylvania's age of consent and unclear Romeo and Juliet laws. By the way, if the only thing preventing you from dating a minor is threat of jail time, there's a bigger issue here. But throughout the fan community, multiple people were going back and forth arguing whether or not Ezra was in the wrong. The answer is yes, by the way, if you're wondering. Legality aside, there's a lot wrong with the age gap alone. Within the show, Arya's mom sniffs out that Ezra is probably in a relationship with a student, and thinking that it isn't her daughter, just tells him to break it off for his own protection. When Arya and Ezra reveal their relationship to her family, her brother punches him in the face, but that's really it in terms of reaction. Arya's dad, who is Ezra's boss by then, arranges for him to get a new teaching job in another city. So you find out this adult man is having a romantic and potentially sexual relationship with your teenage daughter, and you get him another job where he can potentially prey on other teenagers. Though, to be honest, that second part probably wasn't that big of a concern. Pretty Little Liars had an astounding amount of grown men pursuing teen girls, from Ezra to the NAT Club to Detective Darren Wilden, but what is most incomprehensible is how much of their behavior goes without question. The negative treatment of the NAT Club, which is a group of young men who like to film teenage girls changing in their windows, and Detective Darren Wilden, who at the big age of 30 had a sexual relationship with a 15-year-old, are exceptions to the rule, not the norm itself. Even with the NAT Club, the vitriol is targeted towards the leader, so specifically, it's Ian who's consistently vilified along with Detective Wilden. But their villainy is tied to a whole slew of evil behavior, which it should be, but the show never makes the commitment to specifically point to these grown men's interest in teen girls as wrong. There's always some extra layer. You're my girlfriend's little sister. You're my little sister's best friend. You had a pregnancy scare and I didn't support you. That adds to the wrongness. But no one ever comes right out and says this shit is gross.
Y'all are going to jail! Period!
The show can't outright say that the first wrong act that these men committed, irrespective of any other behavior or the outcome of their desires, was the initial pursuit of minors, because to do so means that so many fan favorites have to face greater consequences for their actions. To do so means so many storylines are ended quicker or don't happen at all. And we're trying to produce some dramatic shit here, so we don't have time for a sense of consistent morality. The closest we get to a favorite character being punished is the effort to send Ezra off with a new job, but he conspires with Arya to both bomb his interview and to stand up to her father and say, this is me, this is who I am and what I want, and you're just gonna have to deal. Which is supposed to be seen as romantic. And to be honest, as a 16-year-old, I was eating this shit up, dog. I'm the same age as the main characters, and while they stayed in high school for a bit longer than I did, we all started the show at 16. But as I matured and the characters stayed stagnant, the lackluster rationale being given to a lot of action started to stick out. That and the writing got worse. But it became easier to see how fucked all this stuff was. And more importantly, in hindsight, it was easy for me to see how, as a child, I was willing to ignore all of that in favor of being entertained and being invested in these characters. We don't consume media in a vacuum, and while watching Pretty Little Liars might not lead to you having an affair with your English teacher, it may impact your understanding of healthy romantic boundaries. I also wanted to look at Ezra and Arya in comparison to Fakile and Chad from Blood and Water. because if there's one thing about a high school drama, it's that there's going to be a teenage girl romantically involved with a grown man, double points if he works at her school. Blood and Water is a South African mystery teen drama on Netflix. This show only has one season so far, but by the end of it, Fix and Chad's relationship ends. It's messy, and the resolution is similar to Ezra's and Miss Grundy's, in that Chad is asked to leave the school instead of someone just calling the law, which, especially given that Fix attends a bougie private school, is probably not that inaccurate. The desire to save face and keep things quiet allows a lot of sexual predators to move around quite easily. But anyway, unlike Ezra, Chad takes the opportunity to fucking skedaddle. What I think is more impactful about his character, though, is a scene between him and his pregnant wife. We learn two key things. One, Chad is a former Olympic hopeful who was injured before his time. And two, his wife makes more money than him. We can go further to piece together that Chad is insecure about his positioning in his marriage and is simultaneously looking for someone to vicariously live his Olympic dreams through. His relationship with Fix then looks even more so like the motions of a man desperate for power than of someone who just fell in love with the wrong person at the wrong time. Even if viewers want to brush away the impact of the relationship on Fikile as just romantic drama, this scene paints Chad as being the type of person who would want to, and who does, benefit from an imbalanced power dynamic. And that's huge in comparison to other common narratives that paint teen girls and adult men as being equal partners in a relationship. Now, it is important to note that Chad has a pregnant wife. Similar to Pretty Little Liars, this is an extra layer of wrongness that makes it easier for the story to condemn the relationship. You know that this relationship would be wrong even if Fix was an adult, which is true, but also he's a pedophile, and we can just say that. The shining beacon of inappropriate relationships between teen girls and adult men is Arya and Ezra from Pretty Little Liars. But we can look at a lot of the relationships in Pretty Little Liars. We can look at any vampire young adult story created since 2006, every CW or ABC family show set in a high school, Game of Thrones, Trinkets, Euphoria. It's not just one show. It's all of these images working together to build unrealistic and unhealthy depictions of adult desire of and access to teenagers. We should pinpoint individual expressions of this shit in order to rectify it, but we don't need to see or recreate it to believe that it's happening. I'm of the mind that you can address and unpack trauma and toxic dynamics without watching them unfold, especially because so much media romanticizes toxic dynamics and seems to lose track of any criticism they might have been building up for it. Another recent point of online discussion has been of the film Cuties. I haven't watched the film, so I'm not going to be commenting on its content directly, but rather on its intended impact. The director, Mayamune Decore, has stated that a major part of her vision for Cuties was to draw attention to the impact sexualized media has on young girls' self-image. A frequent point of feedback I've seen about the film is people arguing that, well, she could have done that with adult actors or via a different format like an animated film. Regardless of if you think Decore achieved her goal, there is a layer of separation in watching teens played by adults or animated teens that can ease any discomfort viewers feel, which kind of defeats the point of drawing attention to a toxic structure. Are you as willing to keep questioning if you can rationalize your discomfort away? I think there's a powerful tension in storytelling that can show the clash between childhood and rushed maturity, and that can do so without objectifying the minors in the story. A big part of that success is in actually seeing kids as opposed to adults in Rue 21 outfits. Beyond that, animated or adult acted teenagers don't get away from explicit imagery of minors, and if anything, can skew our understanding of how teenagers look, behave, and should be treated. In Euphoria, Rue is played by Emmy Award-winning actress Zendaya, who's 24 now, but was likely 22 or 23 at the time of filming. Her in-show 13-year-old sister is played by actual 16-year-old Storm Reed. Are there teenagers that look like Zendaya? Arguably yes, or she wouldn't have been cast. I say arguably because lots of TV shows and film like to have Sims 4 syndrome and make teens and young adults look damn near the same, just really ambiguously aged looking characters, which is maybe a good thing for marketing, but on the flip side, just further amplifies the question of why set the story in high school in the first place. But anyway, an adult version of a 16-year-old looks more mature than an actual 16-year-old. Compare even pictures of Rue to pictures of Zendaya at 16. My point isn't to say we need more childlike adult actors, but rather to challenge the depictions of more mature-looking minors. People like to joke that the teenagers in Greece look old as hell, and they do. But we're doing the same thing. Our makeup is just better. And also, the solution isn't to scold teenagers for exploring different forms of expressing themselves, especially when our media is overflowing with real-life grown people playing children. How many people watching Euphoria gush about the makeup and the wardrobe on the show? If you're a teenager watching Barbie Ferreira strut around in a corset, and especially her, because a major part of her character's story arc is about becoming confident with your body, and your reaction is, damn, I want to recreate that, but I got a dress code, so I'm going to flex on these hoes in the mall. And you go out to loiter in the food court in your finest Hot Topic pleather contraption, it's not your fault if someone thinks you look like an adult. You are drawing inspiration from someone you perceive as your age mate. The fault lies in the adult who needs to get the fuck over themselves and stop connecting young women and girls' bodies with sex, and in the media that pushes us to connect the bodies of girls and young women with sex. I can anticipate a common contradictory kind of argument that teens relate to Euphoria because it's more realistic and teens aren't gullible. They can tell this shit isn't real and they're fine. Which brings me back to Pretty Little Liars in the great pedophile debate as a prime example of how that ain't always true. I'm not saying teenagers are stupid, but what I am saying is that they're impressionable. We all are. We don't consume media in a vacuum. And when you relate to characters via age or circumstance, there's a chance for you to absorb some of the bullshit of their storylines without processing why it's actually not good for you. This doesn't have to be something as concrete as wardrobe. This can be really subtle and push through the structure of the show even, such as the acceptability of being voyeuristic towards minors. The argument to use adult actors or animation instead of real children is to protect child actors. But we should also be cognizant that using adults or animation allows directors to be more explicit in how their stories are depicting minors. The pilot episode of Euphoria has a scene where Jules meets a grown man for a hookup that you sure as fuck could not film with a child. I think we should question why in fiction, where you have the potential to do literally any fucking thing you want, because this is the land of make-believe, we so often have stories that show us teen girls being exploited, either by someone within the story explicitly manipulating them, or by the structure of the storytelling showing us teen girls in ways we shouldn't be viewing them. Having teen girls be animated or portrayed by adults does not negate that. When I'm watching Euphoria, the producers are relying on me suspending belief enough to buy that Alexa Demi, who was friends with one of the 40 senators who stabbed Julius Caesar, is a 17-year-old high school student. That means when we see her half-naked body in Maddie's very first scene, when we spend at least a third of Maddie's background sequence watching her recreate moves from porn, we are supposed to be interpreting a 17-year-old doing all of this. Maybe you're more comfortable with the idea of an adult actor performing the specific acts, but the framing of the show is telling us to imagine her as a teenager. What's ickier is that we are told that it's okay that we're watching a teenager do this because that teenager is actually an adult, or because that teenager is actually animated, but the story wants us to look at them as a kid. You know, Like, you can't have it both ways. I can't be suspending belief while also being cognizant, like, it's clashing, sis. When the front is in Africa and the back is in China, those two continents don't meet. The other interesting thing about Euphoria, in terms of the way characters are like hypersexualized and exploited, basically, is that there is another scene where it's in Nate's episode where we see a whole bunch of penises, and it was this huge thing on the internet of like, oh my god, a scene with 30 penises, holy shit. And it's like, are y'all gonna talk about baby girl who got sexually assaulted in the first episode and how we had to watch that when it was really fucking uncomfortable? Are y'all gonna talk about baby girl who is a minor who is participating in sex work and how we have really unnecessarily long scenes watching her do that? Are y'all gonna talk about the porn recreation? Are we gonna talk about any of this? No, it's the 30 penises. And not that that's not worth critiquing, right? Not that that wasn't, I mean, you can argue if it's shocking or not. It's just like a pan of a locker room that I think, in comparison with the rest of the show, actually isn't that jarring. But it's interesting how people are like so scandalized by the idea of the full naked cis male body, and can find all these ways to point out how it's so disturbing that we are being shown bodies that we're supposed to comprehend as teenagers, but don't keep that same energy for the fact that literally day one of the show we are being shown really explicit imagery of teen girls. Returning to the question that started this video cast, isn't it healthy if we move away from these images? Consider the alternative. How much are we being desensitized to inappropriate messaging about minors when we have so much media validating them? Consider how easy it is for people to turn around and blame teenagers for how they behave instead of challenge the media that normalizes adult viewing, encouragement, and participation in said behaviors. We watch wide-eyed and slack-jawed as teen girls are sexualized without question, and then demonize them for buying into that messaging, or worse, for any behavior perceived as sexual when 9 times out of 10, baby girl's just minding her business, living her life. It's easy to shame children for recreating the imagery and situations we're so often entertained by. But why is that? Because it's not an accident that there are so many examples of teen girls being sexualized or placed in inappropriate relationships in media. It's not a circumstance of chance that every year there is a new TV series that shows us a teen girl being paired with an adult man. It's not by happenstance that we're shown adults pursuing minors or much younger people with the least bit of consequence for their action. If anything, we're more often shown a shameful depiction of the younger person in the dynamic. These are purposeful decisions to normalize creep behavior, to push the idea that relationships with huge age gaps are both acceptable and equal in power. And I don't mean this in a conspiracy theory type of way, but in our society has fucked up values, and this is another way we're being taught to buy into them kind of way. The last thing I'll say is that teenagers, as people going through puberty, are experiencing, I hate to use this term, but blossoming sexual desire. They need and deserve safe spaces to discover themselves in that regard. When the two options are be objectified or be shamed, we aren't providing teenagers with the tools to grow healthy relationships to sex, sexuality, and romance. What teens, and specifically teen girls, are so often shown instead is that imbalanced, potentially exploitative relationships with adults are perfectly okay, while adults who may desire much younger partners can see their wants normalized. And that shit's gross. Forever and always, amen. If you made it to the end, thank you for making it to the end. I'm recording this at 2:31 in the ante-meridian under my comforter because it's 2:30 in the fucking morning and I'm not getting up to go record in the closet. So hopefully the audio is good. Anyway, as I said, I ditched a whole other script after writing, editing, researching, and recording it, so I probably won't be back until Lovecraft Country is done. But I am excited for that review. I already have a lot, and we still have 3 episodes left. Until next time, stay safe. I'll see you in the next echo chamber.